My neighbor said I was bringing down property values, but then the HOA fined her $12,000 for her own violations. Temperance had lived in the house next to mine for 8 years when I moved in. She made her opinions clear from day one. My lawn wasn't manicured enough. My car was too old. My fence needed painting. Every HOA meeting, she'd point at my house and sigh dramatically about how much harder it made selling properties on our street. I'm a single dad working 2 jobs. My daughter Bryn was 6 when we moved in, and keeping her fed and in clean clothes mattered more than whether my grass was exactly 2 inches tall. But Temperance didn't care about that. She cared about her property value and her standing in the neighborhood. She was HOA president, after all, queen of Maple Ridge Estates. The complaints started small. A citation for leaving my garbage cans out 4 hours past pickup. A warning about my mailbox needing touch-up paint. A fine for hanging Christmas lights 2 days before the approved decoration period. Each infraction was technically valid according to the HOA bylaws, but Temperance enforced them against my house with surgical precision, while other neighbors violated rules constantly without consequence. When Bryn started leaving chalk drawings on our driveway, Temperance called an emergency HOA meeting. She presented photos of the colorful butterflies and rainbows as evidence of visual pollution. The board voted to ban sidewalk chalk. My 8-year-old daughter cried for 3 days. That's when I started paying attention. I began documenting everything: photos, timestamps, measurements. I walked the neighborhood with a notebook, recording what I saw. It took 6 months to build my case, but what I found was remarkable. Temperance's immaculate property, the one she constantly referenced when criticizing mine, violated 47 different HOA bylaws. Her shed was 3 inches too tall. Her fence extended 6 inches onto HOA common property. She'd installed a satellite dish without approval. Her landscaping included prohibited plant species. She'd repainted her house trim a shade not on the approved color palette. She was running a home business without proper permits, hosting yoga classes in her garage 5 times a week. Her surveillance cameras pointed at the street, violating privacy regulations. And perhaps most damning, she'd built a decorative pond that exceeded size restrictions by 14 square feet. I compiled everything into a folder with photographs, measurements, and direct citations from the HOA bylaws. Then I attended the monthly meeting. Temperance began by proposing new fines for neglectful homeowners. She glanced at me significantly. Before she could continue, I raised my hand and requested the floor for a compliance report. I've noticed some concerning violations, I said, opening my folder. Section 4.2 states that all structures require board approval. Section 7.8 prohibits commercial activity. Section 12.3 restricts water features. I went through each violation methodically. The room grew silent. Temperance's face drained of color. These are all from one property. I finished. The fines totaled $12,000 according to current penalty schedules. Which property? Someone asked. I smiled. 1847 Maple Ridge Drive. Temperance's address. The board had no choice but to investigate. Every violation I documented was confirmed. Temperance tried claiming ignorance, selective enforcement, extenuating circumstances, but she'd spent years establishing that rules were rules. No exceptions. Her own words came back to haunt her. She was removed as HOA president. The fines stood. Her house went up for sale 3 weeks later. I figured that was the end of it. Then yesterday, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single page, printed in block letters. You destroyed my life. Now I'll destroy yours. I know what you did 15 years ago. I know about Denver. I know about the fire. My hands started shaking. Nobody here knew about Denver. Nobody could know. I'd been so careful. This morning, Bryn showed me a photo someone slid under our door during the night. It showed a much younger me, standing in front of burning wreckage, holding something I'd hoped was buried forever. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. I was 23 in that picture, wearing my old construction company jacket, and in my arms was a metal gasoline canister. Behind me, the warehouse was engulfed in flames, orange light reflecting off my face. The timestamp in the corner read 2:47 a.m. June 14th. I hadn't seen that image in 15 years. I thought all copies had been destroyed. Bryn stood in my bedroom doorway, holding the photo with both hands like it might bite her. Dad, what is this? Nothing, sweetheart. Just old work stuff. There's a fire, and you're holding... I said it's nothing. My voice came out sharper than I intended. She flinched. I'd sworn I'd never snap at her like my father had snapped at me, like he'd snapped at my sister before the accident, before everything fell apart. I'm sorry, Bryn. I'm just tired. Go get ready for school. She left without another word, and I heard her bedroom door close with a soft click that felt worse than a slam. I sat on my bed, staring at the photo. My mind raced through every possibility. How did Temperance get this? Who else had she told? What exactly did she know? The fire had been ruled an accident. Faulty wiring in an old textile warehouse scheduled for demolition. The insurance paid out. The investigation closed. Case sealed. But the truth was more complicated. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 14 years. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. Fletcher Residence. Dominic. It's Cameron. Silence stretched across the line. Cameron who? His voice was cautious. Cameron Priest. From Denver. From the warehouse. I heard him exhale slowly. I don't know anyone by that name. Dom, please. Someone knows. They have a photo. Whatever you're talking about, you've got the wrong number. Click. I tried calling back twice. He didn't answer. Dominic had been my foreman at the construction company, the one who'd brought me into the situation in the first place. He'd promised it was foolproof, that no one would get hurt, that the insurance money would save both our families from bankruptcy. His wife had cancer. My sister needed surgery. The company owner was already planning to torch his own property for the payout. but wanted deniability. We were just supposed to make sure the building was empty, and the cameras had a convenient malfunction. We weren't supposed to be there when it happened, but the owner had moved up the timeline without telling us, and we'd walked right into the middle of it. The owner died in the fire, heart attack from the smoke, the coroner said. By the time firefighters arrived, Dominic and I had already fled the scene. Only one security camera had been offline during the event, the one we'd disabled. Another camera across the street, one we hadn't known about, had captured everything. A police detective named Garrison had found us 3 days later. He'd shown us the footage, watched our faces drain of color, then made us an offer. The owner's family was fighting over the insurance payout. If we testified that we'd seen the owner smoking near flammable materials earlier that week, if we supported the accidental fire narrative, Garrison would make the security footage disappear. The man's dead, Garrison had said. His family gets their money. Nobody has to know what really happened. You two walk away clean. We'd taken the deal. We'd lied under oath. The case closed as an accident. Garrison retired 6 months later with a significant increase in his pension fund. I'd always suspected the owner's family had paid him off to ensure the ruling. I'd moved away from Denver within the year, changed jobs, started over. I'd tried to bury it. I'd convinced myself I had, but the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits. I drove Bryn to school in silence. She stared out the window, her backpack clutched in her lap. When I pulled up to the curb, she grabbed the door handle but didn't open it. Dad? Yeah? Are we in trouble? The question hit me like a punch. No, baby, we're fine, I promise. She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. She'd learned to read my tells after her mother left us. She knew when I was scared, even when I tried to hide it. After Bryn disappeared into the school building, I sat in my car and opened the envelope again. Besides the photo, there was a phone number written at the bottom in the same block letters. A local area code. I dialed it from my burner phone, the one I kept for situations that required discretion. It rang once before Temperance answered. I was wondering when you'd call. What do you want? I want my life back. You destroyed me, Cameron. Or should I say, Cameron Priest, arsonist. I didn't set that fire. That's not what this photo suggests. And I have the full video too, from the security camera you thought was disabled. Turns out Detective Garrison kept a copy before he retired. His daughter is in my yoga class. Was in my yoga class before you ruined that too. My blood ran cold. Garrison's dead. He died 4 years ago. But his files aren't. His daughter found them when she was settling his estate. She was going to destroy them until I explained that sometimes justice needs an insurance policy. What do you want? I want you to withdraw your complaint to the HOA board. I want you to admit you falsified those documents. I want you to move out of Maple Ridge Estates within 60 days. That's it? No. I also want $50,000 for my pain and suffering, for the damage you've caused to my reputation. I don't have that kind of money. Then you better find it. Or this photo goes to the police, the local news, and your employer. I wonder how your construction firm will feel about hiring an arsonist. I wonder how a family court will feel about Bryn living with a felon. The line went dead. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. Everything I'd built for the past 15 years was disintegrating. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the phone steady. But beneath the fear, something else started to build. Something cold and calculated. Temperance had made a mistake. She'd assumed I was still the desperate 23-year-old who'd taken Garrison's deal. She didn't know what I'd learned in the years since. She didn't know how far I'd go to protect my daughter. I'd spent 6 months documenting every violation on her property. I could spend another 6 months documenting every detail of her blackmail scheme, but I didn't have 6 months. I had maybe 6 days before she lost patience and pulled the trigger. I needed help. Real help. I drove to the office of Vivian Torres, the attorney who'd handled my custody case when Bryn's mother had abandoned us. Vivian was one of those lawyers who'd started in criminal defense before switching to family law. She knew how to play dirty when necessary. Her receptionist tried to tell me she was booked solid, but I told her it was an emergency. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Vivian in her office, the photo spread out on her desk. She studied it without touching it, her expression neutral. Tell me everything. So I did. The warehouse, the fire, Garrison's deal, the testimony, the sealed case, Temperance's blackmail. When I finished, Vivian leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. First question, did you set that fire? No. Did you know it was going to happen? Not that night. We thought it was scheduled for 2 weeks later. But you knew it was going to happen eventually. I nodded. So you were complicit in insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit arson, even if you didn't light the match. The statute of limitations is 15 years in Colorado for insurance fraud. You're right at the edge. But more importantly, you perjured yourself in the investigation. There's no statute of limitations on that if it's connected to a death, and someone did die in that fire. My stomach dropped. What do I do? Honestly, you're in a corner. If this goes public, you're looking at criminal charges, civil liability, and losing custody of Bryn. Your ex-wife would have grounds to file for full custody, even though she hasn't seen Bryn in 4 years. So I pay Temperance. That's one option, but blackmail doesn't end with one payment. She'll bleed you dry. What's the other option? Vivian smiled, but it wasn't warm. We flipped the script. Blackmail is a felony. If we can document her demands, record her threats, we can go to the police. She goes to prison, and her evidence becomes inadmissible as fruit of the poisonous tree. But then the police see the photo. They reopen the investigation. Maybe we convince them that the photo is out of context, that you were a first responder at the scene, not an arsonist, that Temperance manufactured evidence to frame you because of your HOA dispute. Will that work? It might, if we're careful, if we're smart. She paused. But there's risk. If this goes wrong, you lose everything. I thought about Bryn, about her smile when she'd drawn those chalk butterflies, about how she'd cried when the HOA banned them, about how she'd looked at me this morning with fear in her eyes. What do I need to do? Vivian pulled out a recording device no bigger than a pen cap. Start gathering evidence. Get her to explicitly state her demands. Record every interaction. Build a case. Then we go to the DA with both stories. Her blackmail and your cooperation in coming forward about Denver. What if the DA decides to prosecute me anyway? Then at least you tried to do the right thing. That counts for something. It counted for very little, I thought. But it was better than nothing. I left Vivian's office with the recording device hidden in my shirt pocket and a script memorized for my next conversation with Temperance. The plan was simple. Get her to repeat her demands on tape. Make her feel confident. Let her get sloppy. But when I got home, I found something that changed everything. Bryn was sitting on the front porch, home early from school. Her face was tear-stained and her hands were clenched in her lap. What happened? Why aren't you at school? Mrs. Patterson called me to the office. She said someone sent an email to the school board. About you. About a fire. My vision blurred at the edges. What did the email say? That you were under investigation for arson. That I wasn't safe living with you. Mrs. Patterson said she had to call child services. They're coming to the house tomorrow to talk to both of us. I sat down beside her, my legs suddenly unable to hold my weight. Temperance wasn't waiting. She was escalating. Dad, did you burn something down? I looked at my daughter, at her red-rimmed eyes and trembling chin, at the trust that was starting to crack in her gaze. I could lie. I could tell her it was all a misunderstanding. I could protect her from the truth a little longer. But I was tired of lying. I was tired of running from what happened in Denver. It's complicated, sweetheart. But I need you to know something. Everything I've ever done, every choice I've made since you were born, has been to keep you safe and happy. And I'm not going to stop now. Are we going to be okay? I pulled her close. I don't know, but I'm going to fight like hell to make sure we are. That night, after Bryn finally fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started digging. If Temperance wanted to play dirty, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I started with Detective Garrison's daughter. Her name was Patricia Garrison Wells, and according to her social media, she was a yoga instructor and wellness coach. Her Facebook page showed photos of her classes, including several featuring Temperance as a regular attendee. I dug deeper. Patricia's LinkedIn showed she'd worked as a paralegal before becoming a yoga instructor. She'd quit 3 years ago after some kind of falling out with her law firm. A quick search of court records showed she'd been sued by her former employer for theft of client files. The case had been settled out of court. Interesting. I kept searching. Patricia had filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. She'd lost her house to foreclosure. She'd been sued by 3 different creditors. She needed money. Temperance had found someone desperate. But there was something else. Patricia's father, Detective Garrison, had died in a car accident. Single vehicle collision. He'd driven off a bridge in the middle of the night. The official report said he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. No alcohol in his system. No signs of foul play. But the accident had happened exactly 1 week after the warehouse owner's son had been arrested for insurance fraud in an unrelated case. The son had been trying to follow in his father's footsteps, apparently. Torch a building, collect the insurance, rinse and repeat. Had someone thought Garrison knew too much? Had someone wanted to tie up loose ends? I was probably being paranoid. But 15 years of looking over my shoulder had taught me that paranoia sometimes kept you alive. I started writing down everything I knew. The timeline of events in Denver, the names of everyone involved, the details of Garrison's death, Patricia's financial troubles, Temperance's vendetta. Somewhere in this mess was a thread I could pull. I just had to find it. At 2:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text message was simple. TikTok Cameron, child services visit in 12 hours. Last chance to make this go away. Wire transfer instructions attached. I forwarded the message to Vivian immediately, then replied to Temperance, I need proof you'll delete everything if I pay. Her response came within seconds. You're not in a position to negotiate. Pay or lose your daughter. I took a screenshot, then another. Documentation was everything now. But even as I gathered evidence, I knew the truth. I was racing against a clock I couldn't stop. Child services would come tomorrow. They'd investigate. They'd find the photo, the accusation, the email to the school board. Even if it was all based on blackmail, even if I could eventually prove my innocence, the damage would be done. Bryn would be placed in temporary custody while the investigation proceeded. She'd be put with a foster family or worse, with her mother, who'd walked out on her 4 years ago and hadn't bothered to visit since. I couldn't let that happen. At 4:00 a.m., I made a decision. I got dressed in dark clothes and drove to Temperance's house. Her for sale sign still stood in the front yard, slightly crooked from the wind. The house was dark except for a single light in what I knew was her home office. She was awake too, probably savoring her victory. I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, staying in the shadows. The recording device was in my pocket. My phone was set to automatically upload everything to a cloud server Vivian had set up. I rang the doorbell. It took 2 minutes for Temperance to answer. She opened the door with a chain still attached, peering through the gap. When she saw me, she smiled. Couldn't sleep, Cameron? We need to talk. Unless you're here with my money, we have nothing to discuss. I have a counteroffer. Her smile widened. She unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of red wine. Behind her, I could see her office, papers spread across the desk. This should be interesting. Come in. I stepped into her house for the first time. It was immaculate, as expected. Everything in its place, everything controlled. She led me to her office and gestured to a chair. I sat. She remained standing, a power move. So what's this counteroffer? I can't get you $50,000, but I can get you something better. I'm listening. I can get you your reputation back. I can go to the HOA board and tell them I made a mistake, that I measured wrong, that you never violated any bylaws. We both know that's a lie. So is your blackmail. But lies work if enough people believe them. She took a sip of her wine, considering. What do you want in return? You destroy the photo. You delete the video. You tell child services you made a mistake. You leave me and my daughter alone. And why would I do that when I currently hold all the cards? Because I found something interesting about Patricia Garrison Wells. Her expression didn't change, but her grip on the wine glass tightened slightly. Patricia's father died in a car accident 4 years ago, but before he died, he made a substantial deposit into Patricia's bank account, $75,000. The source of the funds was listed as consulting fees. Interesting amount, don't you think? Right around the same time the warehouse owner's son was being investigated. I have no idea what you're talking about. Detective Garrison was blackmailing the owner's son. He had evidence that the son knew about his father's insurance fraud scheme. He was bleeding him dry, just like you're trying to bleed me. But the son got tired of paying, and Garrison ended up dead. Temperance's face paled. You're making this up. Am I? Because I have bank records. I have emails. I have a paper trail that connects Garrison to the son. And if that son thought his blackmailer was dead, what do you think he'll do when he finds out Garrison's daughter has copies of all her father's files? You wouldn't. Try me. You threaten my daughter, I burn down your entire world. Not with fire with information. We stared at each other. The silence stretched. Finally, Temperance set down her wine glass. You're bluffing. Call my bluff then. See what happens. She walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. Inside was the photo, printed in high resolution. Underneath were several pages of what looked like the full report from the Denver investigation. You want this? Fine, take it. But know this, Cameron, I'm not the only one who has copies. Patricia has backups. The owner's son has been notified that the files exist. If anything happens to me, if I have any accidents, this all goes public. Who says I need to do anything to you? I just need to make you irrelevant. I pulled out my phone and opened an email. 30 minutes ago, I sent a full confession to the Denver DA. I detailed everything that happened at the warehouse. The conspiracy, the lies, the cover-up, Detective Garrison's involvement, the blackmail scheme, all of it. Temperance's face went white. You what? I also sent copies to the FBI field office in Denver, the Colorado Bar Association, and 3 different journalists who specialize in police corruption. By morning, this is going to be a very big story. And your blackmail scheme? That's going to be part of it. You're insane. You just confessed to a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. But here's the thing. I'm cooperating. I'm coming clean. I'm throwing myself on the mercy of the court. And when they find out you were using evidence from a corrupt cop to blackmail me, you're going down too. I didn't know Garrison was corrupt. Prove it. Because from where I'm sitting, you knowingly used illegally obtained evidence to extort money from me and interfere with a child custody arrangement. That's blackmail, witness tampering, and about 6 other charges I can't remember because I'm not a lawyer. She grabbed the desk to steady herself. This will destroy you. Maybe. But it'll destroy you too. And I'm willing to lose everything if it means my daughter stays safe from people like you. I stood up and walked to the door. By the way, this entire conversation was recorded, including the part where you admitted to having evidence and making demands. I'd recommend getting a very good lawyer. You're going to need one. I left her standing there, frozen in shock. The drive home felt surreal. I'd just confessed to crimes I'd spent 15 years hiding. I'd just thrown away any chance of walking away clean. But I'd also taken away Temperance's power. If she released the photo now, it would just be piling on. The story was already out there, told on my terms, with my cooperation. I'd lose my construction job. I'd probably face criminal charges. I might even go to prison. But Bryn wouldn't end up with her mother. Child Services would see that I'd voluntarily come forward, that I was taking responsibility. With Vivian's help, I might be able to retain custody, at least until everything was sorted out. When I got home, I found Vivian sitting on my front porch. She looked tired and angry. You sent the confession without telling me. I couldn't risk you talking me out of it. I'm your lawyer, Cameron. You don't make decisions like that without consulting me. I'm sorry, but it was the only way. She sighed and rubbed her temples. You're probably right, but this is going to get messy. Really messy. I know. The DA in Denver has already called me. They want you to come in for an interview next week. They're considering charges, but they're also interested in the Garrison angle. If you can help them prove he was corrupt, they might be willing to work out a plea deal. What kind of deal? Probation maybe? Community service? Restitution? You'd have to cooperate fully, testify if needed, but you might avoid prison. And Bryn? That's the tricky part. Child Services is still coming tomorrow, but I've already filed emergency motions explaining the situation. I'm arguing that you were a victim of blackmail and that you came forward voluntarily. That should count for something. Should? Family court is unpredictable, but I'll fight for you. I promise. She left around 6 a.m. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. At 7:30, Bryn came downstairs, already dressed for school. She looked at me and knew immediately that something had changed. What happened? I told her everything. The warehouse, the fire, the lies, the blackmail, the confession. I didn't spare any details. She deserved the truth. When I finished, she was crying. Not the loud, dramatic sobs of a child, but the quiet tears of someone processing something too big for their age. Are you going to jail? I don't know. Maybe. Did you hurt anyone? Not directly. But my lies helped cover up a man's death. I'm responsible for that. She wiped her eyes. What happens to me? Vivian thinks you can stay with your grandmother while everything gets sorted out. Your mom's mom, the one in Florida. Not my actual mom? No, never her. Bryn nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. Her strength broke my heart. She was 10 years old and already learning that the world was complicated and unfair, and that sometimes good people did bad things. The child services visit happened at 10 a.m. A woman named Helen Rodriguez came to the house with a clipboard and a kind but professional demeanor. She interviewed Bryn first, then me. I told her everything I'd told the DA. I showed her the threatening messages from Temperance. I explained that I'd come forward voluntarily to protect my daughter from a blackmail scheme. Helen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she closed her notebook. Mr. Priest, I appreciate your honesty, but you understand I have to recommend temporary placement while this investigation proceeds. I understand. Your daughter's grandmother has already been contacted and has agreed to take custody. Bryn will fly to Florida this weekend. Bryn, sitting on the couch behind me, made a small sound. I turned and saw her face crumple. How long? I asked. That depends on the criminal proceedings. If you're not charged or if you reach a favorable plea deal, she can come home relatively quickly. If you're charged and it goes to trial, she trailed off. I understand. The next few days blurred together. News outlets picked up the story of the Denver warehouse fire reopening. Detective Garrison's name was dragged through the mud. Patricia Garrison Wells was arrested for blackmail and possession of stolen evidence. Temperance was arrested too. The recordings I'd made were enough to charge her with extortion and witness tampering. She hired an expensive lawyer and posted bail immediately. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and removed all penalties against my property. They also offered a public apology. It felt hollow. Dominic, my old foreman from Denver, came forward after seeing the news. He corroborated my story. He admitted we'd both been manipulated by the warehouse owner and coerced by Garrison. The DA in Denver offered me a plea deal, 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full cooperation in prosecuting anyone else involved in the conspiracy. I took it. Vivian managed to convince the family court judge that I was a reformed man taking responsibility for past mistakes. I retained custody of Bryn, but with supervised visitation for the first year. Bryn flew to Florida to stay with her grandmother for 3 months while I got my life in order. She called every night. She told me about the beach and her new school, and how her grandmother made terrible cookies but excellent pancakes. She never asked when she could come home. She knew I'd tell her as soon as I knew. Temperance's case went to trial. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Patricia Garrison Wells took a plea deal and testified against her. The warehouse owner's son was reinvestigated based on evidence found in Garrison's files. It turned out he'd known about his father's scheme all along and had helped plan it. He was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit arson, and negligent homicide. 15 years after the fire, the truth finally came out. 3 months after everything started, Bryn came home. I picked her up at the airport, and she ran to me like she was 6 years old again, not 10. She wrapped her arms around my waist and wouldn't let go. I missed you so much, Dad. I missed you too, sweetheart. We drove home together. She chattered about Florida and her grandmother and all the things she wanted to show me, but as we pulled into our driveway, she went quiet. Temperance's house was empty now. A sold sign had replaced the for sale one. Who bought it? Bryn asked. A nice family with 3 kids. They asked if we had any recommendations for good sidewalk chalk brands. She smiled. Did you tell them Rainbow Sparkle? Obviously. We got out of the car and walked up to our front door. Someone had left a package on the porch. Inside was a box of Rainbow Sparkle sidewalk chalk and a note. Welcome to the neighborhood. We heard your daughter is an artist. Bryn looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Can I draw on the driveway? Every single day. She spent the rest of the afternoon covering our driveway in butterflies and rainbows and flowers. The new neighbors came over to introduce themselves. Their kids joined in the drawing. I sat on the porch steps and watched. For the first time in 15 years, I felt something close to peace. The past would never truly disappear. I'd carry the weight of what happened in Denver forever, but I'd stopped running from it. I'd faced it head on, consequences and all, and somehow we'd survived. That night, after Bryn was asleep, I got an email from Dominic. Saw you on the news. Proud of you for coming forward. I did the same. They offered me a deal too. Probation and community service. My wife says I'm sleeping better now, not looking over my shoulder anymore. Guess we both needed to stop running. Take care of yourself, brother, and take care of that little girl of yours. I wrote back, we're going to be okay. Both of us. 6 months later, I'd completed 300 hours of community service. I'd lost my construction job but found work as a consultant for a company that investigated insurance fraud. Ironic, considering. I'd become the guy who helped catch people doing what I'd once done. The supervised visitation ended. The judge said I'd demonstrated genuine rehabilitation and that Bryn was thriving in my care. Temperance was released from prison after serving 18 months. She moved to another state. I never heard from her again. Patricia Garrison Wells served 6 months and was released on parole. She sent me a letter apologizing for her role in the blackmail scheme. She explained that she'd been desperate for money and had made terrible choices. I understood that better than anyone. The warehouse owner's son went to prison for 15 years. Justice. Delayed, but delivered. On the anniversary of the Denver fire, I took Bryn to visit the site where the warehouse had stood. It was a parking lot now, nothing indicating what had once happened there. Why did we come here? She asked. Because sometimes you need to face the things that scare you. This place has haunted me for 15 years, but it doesn't own me anymore. Does that mean we can go home now? Yeah, sweetheart, we can go home. 2 years after everything fell apart, I stood in front of the HOA board for the final time. They'd asked me to serve as president after the previous leadership resigned in the wake of the temperance scandal. I declined politely. I'm not interested in power. I'm just interested in keeping this neighborhood a place where kids can draw on their driveways and families can live without being harassed for minor violations. They thanked me for my service and revised the HOA bylaws to be less punitive and more focused on community building. Bryn is 12 now. She still draws on the driveway. She's also taken up painting and wants to be an artist when she grows up. She knows the full story of what happened in Denver. She knows I'm not perfect, that I made mistakes, that I'm still working to make things right. But she also knows I'll always fight for her, always protect her, always choose her. Last week she asked if we could get a dog. The HOA bylaws technically required approval for pets, but I figured after everything, they owed us one. We adopted a golden retriever puppy. Bryn named her Butterfly. This morning I found a drawing she'd left on the kitchen table. It showed two stick figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of a house with a dog. Above them, she'd written in her careful handwriting, "My dad and me, we're home." I taped it to the refrigerator where I'd see it every day. The past doesn't disappear. The mistakes don't vanish. The guilt doesn't fade completely. But you can choose to stop running. You can choose to face it, own it, and try to do better. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a second chance to prove you deserve it. I look at that drawing every morning, and every morning I promise myself I'll keep fighting to be the dad that little stick figure deserves. That's all any of us can do, really. Keep fighting, keep trying, keep choosing to be better than we were yesterday. The warehouse burned down 15 years ago, but we didn't burn with it. We survived, and that's enough.